The motion before us is, this House believes that prisoners should have the right to vote. Proposing the motion will be Dubai College, opposing the motion will be English International College. This debate will be judged by Caroline Mustax and Eleanor Costa-Law. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to present their case. After 1 minute, the bell will ring to indicate that points of information are allowed. If you wish to put forth the POI, you must stand up, state point of information, and remain standing until the point of information is either accepted or rejected. POIs are only allowed for the first 3 speakers in each queue. There are no points of information allowed during the reply speaker's address. After 4 minutes, the bell will ring again to indicate that POIs are no longer allowed. The bell will ring once again at the 5th minute to indicate that your time is concluded. You then have 30 seconds to complete your arguments. After this time, the bell will ring like this to indicate that you must return to your seat immediately. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the first speaker from the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, the status quo is flawed. The prison system ostracizes people and establishes them as inferior second-class citizens. And that increasing reoffending rates that we observe in the 21st century represents that. Today, Team Proposition will structure our entire debate around the 4 pillars of justice: rehabilitation, retribution, safety, and deterrence. We will comprehensively prove that these pillars are either improved by enfranchising prisoners or not harmed by it. Now, I will be addressing the integration that prisoners will receive through governmental policy that will definitely improve if they are given the right to vote. My second speaker will be addressing it from the perspective of the prisoners. When you look at the fact that if you are given the right to vote, it establishes that direct connection with society that we believe cannot be formed in any other way. My third speaker will be looking at the fact that deterrence is not harmed on our side of the house. Now, the stakeholders of today's debate, the prisoners, regular society, and the prison system all benefit on our side of the house. We established the fact that prison is a spectrum, yet we observe a uniform level of ostracization that must be stopped.
Point of information?
Sure.
Do you believe that someone who doesn't agree with the law should be allowed to change it?
Well, the point is that people do make mistakes, yes, but we believe by leaving them and ostracizing them, we are only contributing to the problem. The issue is that people are inherently put away and locked away in society. And if we do not provide them with the right to vote, how in any way are we going to improve this situation? Team Proposition believe that this is an effective means of solving a problem that is affecting our society. Now, as I was saying, we as Team Proposition believe that prison is a spectrum. Not every single prisoner is going to be convicted of violent crimes. Yet we believe that this uniform, one-size-fits-all policy that is provided is extremely detrimental to all the stakeholders involved. Now, there are a few definitions that I'd like to go into. Number 1, prisoners. These are people who are incarcerated or waiting trial. But the more important one, right to vote. Being able to vote in elections that you would have been able to vote in if you were not incarcerated. Now, this applies to national elections and local elections, depending on the registered home addresses of the prisoners in question. Now, we believe that we would be able to set up polling stations in the prisons to make sure that there is adequate safety for every single person involved. Now, it is an unfortunate truth that there structural discrimination exists against prisoners, which establishes them as second-class citizens. We have a one-size...
You constantly refer to them as second-class citizens, but do you believe these people are as valuable as people who work hard and provide for the families and the nation? Do you think people who murder and assassinate and rape people are as valuable?
But I believe that having that attitude will only perpetuate the problem that already exists. If we push them to one side and say that they're worse than us, how are they expected to feel? Are you really expecting reoffending rates to improve if you have that sort of attitude when it comes to prisoners? Now, the issue in the 21st century is that politicians do not cater to the affairs and to the lives of prisoners in our judiciary system because they see no benefit. Why are politicians going to improve a system when they receive no tangible benefit in terms of support or votes? That is why if we provide prisoners with the right to vote, this will establish a key demographic that both provides them with a voice but does not deter the rights to vote of normal citizens who are not incarcerated. Sure.
It does deter the right because these prisoners are not paying any taxes, whereas only 3 people are paying taxes and they're deciding what they're doing with their money.
But they're deciding what they're doing with their money, but sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yes. You said it'd be as fair for people who are free if prisoners vote. But this is not true because prisoners are voting and the vote is then used. Politicians use their money of people who actually pay taxes, and prisoners are not paying taxes. It's clearly unfair for the free people.
Now, voting is a fundamental right regardless of whether you pay taxes. Where I come from in the UAE, we do not have a tax law system, but everyone is allowed to vote in certain elections that do exist. Now, the enfranchisement establishes them as a democratic that people will cater to them. Governments will improve conditions in prisons and improve the fallacies in the judiciary system. There is no way that we will be able to solve a system if we completely push them to one side, which is the attitude that I believe personally, as well as proposition, that opposition are taking. We believe that if we push these people to one side, forget them, just put them in a box and throw away the key, then we're surprised that there's a problem when it comes to the way that these people are coming out. They are not being educated. They are not politically engaged. Yet, Team Opposition blames us for making a tangible change to that, but we don't see any other method of having those same benefits. If we enfranchise the people, integration is accelerated. They would no longer be viewed as inferior in the eyes of mainstream politics, because mainstream politics will have to cater to them in order to get a significant amount of votes. And therefore, the prison system will be benefited in a way that not only protects them while they're incarcerated, but when they go out. Thank you very much.
5 minutes and 2 seconds. I would now like to invite the first speaker from the opposition.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the proposition, judges and chair. This House strongly believes that prisoners shouldn't be allowed to vote. Because if you're not willing to abide by the law that we've all chosen, then why should you be allowed to change it? Now, unlawful politicians, murderers, rapists, these people have shown their unwillingness to respect society. They have taken your freedom, and they have taken mine. They have robbed you. They've taken the tax that you pay through your hard-earned work and have illegally used it to buy themselves a multi-million-dollar villa in the Bahamas. Should they be allowed to vote? They have brutally murdered multiple families, tortured them, stripped them of their identity. They have claimed their lives. Should they be allowed to vote? They have raped a 15-year-old girl, taken her virginity against her will. What if those your daughter? Should they be allowed to vote?
Point of information.
Yes, thank you.
But are these people still not people? They still not have rights the same as every other person.
Exactly, they don't and they shouldn't. Why? Because they have taken your rights before that. Therefore, they should be deprived from their own rights. Now, the definitions my team and I are bringing forward today are the following. For prisoner, a person found guilty of a crime and sent to prison. And for crime, an act that is illegal and can be punished by the law. I would like now to rebut some of the points made by the opposition's third speaker. Yes, thank you.
You talked about the fact that if they broke the law, they do not deserve to have rights in the eyes of the law. Does that mean that we should not be providing prisoners with shelter, food and water? Because those are essential human rights as well.
Well, of course, we should be providing with them, but the wider rights that affect society, such as voting, they should be deprived of. Now, the first speaker stated that by allowing prisoners to vote, we can improve the situation. However, I wonder what a drug dealer opinions would be about legalizing drugs. Do they seriously think allowing people, no thank you, do they seriously think allowing people with this kind of opinion would improve the situation? Furthermore, the first speaker stated that they are not educated. However, the state provides wide education in prisons to the ones who are willing to take it. Now, my second speaker will explain how criminals have abused the system by corrupting it. Therefore, they should have no right to decide how the system itself works. Furthermore, criminals don't pay tax, so why should they choose how your money is spent? My third speaker will elaborate on how, no thank you, will elaborate on how many criminals have psychological problems, which will make them unable to reach a proper judgment, therefore unable to vote. And this is true in our society, regardless if you're a prisoner or not. Ladies and gentlemen. Yes, thank you.
Do people who are on unemployment benefits or in the lowest bracket who do not have to pay tax, are they exempt from the right to vote?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
I said that in certain countries, people who are in the lowest income bracket, they do not have to pay tax on their income. Are they removed of their right to vote?
No, of course not, because they're still working hard and providing money to the economy to keep it going, and they haven't broken anyone's rights. So therefore, of course, they should be allowed to vote. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very simple concept that I'm sure we can all understand. When someone deprives you from your freedom, either by robbing you, abusing you, or even killing you, they should not be allowed to execute their freedom, in this case, by voting. It is the basic concept that your freedom ends where mine begins. Now I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, why should they be allowed to change the law when what they do is break it?
Point of information.
Yes, thank you.
Do you really think politicians are going to implement policies that are harmful to society?
Yes, I mean, of course, and it has been done in the past. For example, in Spain, we have a case of a political party which is made up by terrorists who are, of course, providing policies, and they are in parliament, by the way, that are harmful to society. I will ask you this question again. Why should they change the law when all they do is break it? Thank you.
Four minutes, 25 seconds. I would now like to invite the second speaker from the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, the point of justice is not revenge. My first speaker came up and demonstrated to you what the four pillars of a modern, effective justice system are. They are rehabilitation, retribution, safety, and deterrence. Now, on the other hand, the first speaker of Team Opposition came up here and gave you an emotional rant about how prisoners are bad people and they break our laws, and so they shouldn't have a right to vote. The fact of the matter is, voting is an inalienable right. It is a fundamental right that every human should have. And as a result, it is on Team Opposition to prove why removing the right to vote can improve those four pillars to a degree that makes it so that taking away that fundamental right of an individual is worth it. Team Opposition, at least their first speaker, has not done that. Instead, he came up here, he talked about taxation in purely economic terms. Voting is not based on your economic status. As my first speaker again did in POI, voting, you don't not get to vote if you don't contribute to taxes. You get to vote because you're a person, and people have a right to vote. Accept it.
You claim that one of the four pillars of justice is deterrence. However, do you not think that by allowing prisoners the right to vote, a very prestigious right, this would actually do the opposite and not deter them at all?
Okay, my third speaker is going to come on to this in detail, but the fact of the matter is an individual isn't thinking of their right to vote when they're out robbing a store or dealing drugs. Your right to deterrence is something that a prisoner has to think about, is that they're going to lose their freedom. The right to vote, whilst an important right to individuals, and important when you lose it, is not something I think the average individual does think about. Now, moving on to my substantive point, I'm going to be talking about how, by allowing prisoners to vote, you will actually increase the pillar of rehabilitation. You'll reduce recidivism, and you'll create a society in which prisoners can leave the prison system being more effectively able to join society. Now, firstly, on education.
You go on and on about rehabilitation, and we agree. But as you have said, and your first speaker said, you plan on treating them as equals, as all of us. So how do you think that they will realise what they've done is wrong, but you treat them as innocents?
Because, again, prisoners are people. Prisoners have the same rights as everyone. We remove certain rights, like their right to freedom, in order to effectively prosecute the justice system and in order to make our society. But if you cannot demonstrate how removing that right will benefit society, the prisoners, by default, have that right. Now, on to education. As your first speaker said, you talked about how prisoners can't be bothered to be educated. Now, the state provides good education systems. And I'll ask you, would you be bothered to pay attention to an election that you know you could have no influence on? Would you be bothered to pay attention to a society that's discarded you to the side and that you are entirely disconnected from? By giving prisoners the right to vote, you incentivise prisoners to actually educate themselves and to actually you incentivise them to pay attention to the news, to pay attention to newspapers, to pay attention to the society they live in, because they now have a stake in it, because they now know that when they get to vote, they will be able to have an influence on the society, keeping prisoners connected with society. And that was my second point. Accepted?
You mentioned that prisoners should have the same rights, and therefore they shouldn't be punished. So what's the point in having the law anyway?
I did not say that. What I said is that you have to demonstrate that removing an individual's right improves the system. For example, we remove a prisoner's right to freedom because that's important for protecting the safety of society. But when we don't remove a prisoner's right to food because they have a fundamental right to that, and we don't think that starving prisoners benefits it. Team opposition has to demonstrate the benefit to society that not voting causes. Now, as I was saying, by allowing prisoners to vote, you connect them with society. You install a sense of civic duty. Prisoners often end up re-offending and going back to prison because when they leave prison, they are suddenly in a society that perhaps for years they have had no interaction with. By giving them an interaction with society, by giving them a stake in the world they live in, what you do is you create a justice system in which when prisoners leave, they don't come back. Instead of isolating them away, just for them to leave the system and immediately be arrested for some other crime. The fact of the matter is that there are multiple benefits to giving prisoners the right to vote, to improving the justice system, to improving our society, whereas the only benefit to removing their right to vote, the only benefit to Team Opposition's case is some emotional plea to how prisoners are bad people, and that is why prisoners should have the right to vote.
Four minutes, 55 seconds. I would now like to invite the second speaker from the opposition.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, judges, chair, and members of the proposition. This House believes that prisoners shouldn't have the right to vote. How would you feel if a murderer chose where your tax money was spent? I would like to begin by rebutting some of the points already made by the proposition. Their first speaker stated that prisoners are an inferior class citizen, and this is true. That is the whole point. This is a punishment. When you cannot follow a country's law, you become an inferior class citizen. He stated they made a mistake and ostracizing them is wrong. He said we should help them. This is fundamentally flawed, as you are suggesting to spend more taxpayers' money on trying to rehabilitate criminals that are already past the point of no return. Their third speaker gave my team a POI asking if they are not still human and still have rights. However, when you commit a crime, the punishment is you lose a vast amount of those rights. Your team wants to give murderers no thank you, rapists and terrorists more rights. I find that very immoral. No thank you. Their second speaker stated the right to vote is part of one's freedom. This is highly refutable, as when you commit a crime, you lose that freedom and the right to vote. What is the point of our laws if we do not remove their freedom from them? Yes, please.
Do you not understand that our entire analysis focuses on the fact that voting is like food or drink or shelter, and that because it's so intrinsic to democracy, needs to be prisoners.
I think comparing food and shelter to voting is two different complete topics. We need food and we need shelter to survive. We do not need to vote to survive. If it's not broken, then don't fix it. If you cannot follow the laws, why should you have the right to vote? They abuse their rights and now must be punished. They are not willing to improve our country, no thank you. So why should they have a say to what happens in our country's government? Why influence the law when you don't even follow it? When you vote, you vow to behave in a form which is most beneficial for society and the people around you. Yes, please.
So do you really think that politicians are going to implement policies and campaign for things that are inherently harmful to society and serve only a minority, which is prison?
As my first speaker said, they have done it in the past, so therefore they can do it again. People in society are actively seeking to improve its economy and well-being. A criminal is clearly damaging society and therefore shouldn't have the right to vote. We are here to improve each other's lives. My tax and charity will have benefits for all the others in my society. If I went and burnt down a shop, killing 3, should I be allowed to change the outcome of this country when I have abused the criminal justice system? No, thank you. In prison, you are detached from society. And without that complete understanding of current politics, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. It is such a powerful right to have. And if you lose most rights, then why should you keep that privilege?
Point of information?
No, thank you. If you are active in the community, you are a resident and you pay tax, you have the right to vote. Prisoners do not pay tax, so why would they be given a privilege that the average person does not have?
Point of information?
No, thank you. They would literally choose where our money goes and where it is spent. Although they do not contribute a penny. In fact, them committing a crime actually is costing the government taxpayers' money. If you want to keep your rights, then follow the law. It is as simple as that. No, thank you. Prisoners are individualistic, as they put their needs in front of everyone else. Therefore, they will vote for parties that will be more lenient on prison sentences. Our cities will soon be chaotic and anarchy will break loose. Criminals looting, raping and killing. This is not the utopia that we are working and striving for. So many years of tax, charity and hard work down the drain if we allow prisoners to vote. Therefore, this House strongly believes prisoners shouldn't have the right to vote. As why should they change the laws when they break the laws? Thank you very much.
Generally, no. You can, there are distributions of sentences, but generally the change in sentencing is normally for extraordinary things like you have to wait for removing the sentence. It's like if you decided that the law is inherently unjust, that could happen. But generally, it's just change like, oh, this is a sentence, 5 years, 3 years.
I would now like to invite the third speaker from the proposition.
So, ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to head straight into some rebuttal by refuting the point that the team opposition clearly seems to misunderstand what is at hand here. Team opposition tries to insinuate that politicians that are trying to get elected by getting a majority of votes will simply make radical policies based on the opinions of the minority prison population. Ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you that the prison population of the USA is only 1%. 1% of America's prison population is incarcerated. What we believe as team proposition is that prison population being allowed the vote will not suddenly allow them to make laws, as I quote team opposition. It will not allow them to create radical policies. It will not allow them to get sentences commuted. That is not how democracy and elections work. what will happen is that politicians will now, as our second speaker and third speaker mentioned, the politicians will now be encouraged to probably incentivize and alter their policies slightly to perhaps engage with the 1% and allow them to get a few more votes. No, thank you. We would like to say that they simply fail to understand the fact that law's radical policies will not be created for the 1% of prison population. They're simply not how
in Spain, Catalonia's parliament wants the region to separate from Spain. That goes against the constitution and it seems to me quite radical. How would you respond to this?
Well, this is clearly one example. And again, this is not the way, they did not separate, did they, in the end? So this is clearly not how it works. Again, furthermore, I would like to rebut the taxation point, which is, again, incredibly flawed. The taxation point, as we mentioned in the POI, the unemployed population do not pay taxes, they're not contributing to the economy as they responded since they are unemployed, they're not contributing, they're not paying taxes, yet they still have their inherent right to vote. Yes?
You said how even though criminals want to agree with policies which are bad for the country, they won't be able to do it because they're 1%. So you just acknowledge that prisoners will vote with bad intentions, so why should we allow them to vote anyway?
We're not saying that they will vote bad, they will vote for their own intentions, yes? They will vote for what they want, and this allows them engagement with society. As our third speaker mentioned, this allows that dehumanization that the prison system offers you, the ostracization that prisoners suffer, to be mitigated, allowing them to connect with society, being allowed to voice their opinions, no thank you, allows them to connect with society, reminds them of their civic duty, and enhances rehabilitation. No thank you. We would like to again say that we are not simply being lenient on these on prisoners. Voting, as I will move on to in my main substantive, is not a key intrinsic thing that people are deterred to. If a criminal is deciding to commit a crime, I'm sure that, I will lose my right to vote, is not the main deterrent in their head. And the main deterrents of committing crimes are things such as losing their freedom, losing their families, having to be incarcerated in a prison, not losing their right to vote. And this I was expanded to a main substantive before that.
Do you not believe the punishment for breaking the law is being removed from society?
Being removed from society, they are being incarcerated in a closed unit. I would like to now move on to my main substantive, which states the fact that, again, deterrence, I will be talking about, as we mentioned, our case is based on the 4 principles. And I'll be talking about how deterrence and retribution are not negatively affected by allowing the prison population to vote. I would like to say the revoking voting right does not have any great power of deterrence. As the general population here, I'm sure that being allowed a right to vote is not something that we think about on the daily basis. I'm sure it's not something, no thank you, that we wake up and feel that we love. We love our families, we love access to all these entertainment, our families' freedom to move around. This is what we value losing when going to prison, not our rights to vote. That's why a criminal, if we allow criminals the right to vote, no thank you, it will not be a great impact and reduce deterrence. It will not mean that they will start committing crimes because, prison is great now because prisoners can vote. That's simply not how prisons are. Prisoners are already having so many rights revoked from them. They are revoking their right for freedom. And again, the basic human rights that can be revoked are only revoked because they infringe on the 4 pillars, such as the right to freedom is revoked because it infringes on the pillar of safety. So what we believe on team proposition is that the right to vote, the basic human right, included by the ECHR, which includes voting as a basic human right, which team opposition treat as a privilege rather than a right, is something that is intrinsic, and 2, does not have any great harm and only benefits the 4 pillars. We'd like to again say that voting doesn't significantly negatively influence retribution either, as retribution, another pillar, is punishment and losing something that you value. But as we've already established, voting is not something that the average person values until it is the time to vote. They are not being punished simply by not being allowed to vote. I'm sure any prisoner, they're not the most upset about losing their right to vote. And that's why we believe that there is no significant harm or infringement of the 4 pillars of justice. Therefore, there is no justification to revoke a basic human right. Thank you.
Five minutes, 18 seconds.
invite the third speaker from the opposition.
Ladies, gentlemen, members of the proposition, judges and chair. This House does not believe that prisoners should have the right to vote. Before I like to start my own speech, I'd like to start by rebutting some of the points proposed to you by the proposition. Firstly, they keep stating that prison makes prisoners feel inferior second-class citizens. However, they're not taking into account the victims of these crimes. If someone comes and infringes upon my own human rights, surely they're making me feel the inferior second-class citizen and not them themselves. Therefore, they should be punished for this, for infringing upon someone else's human rights and making them feel inferior to others. Furthermore, they keep claiming that prisoners are ostracised from society. Do they believe that those who are ostracised from society and not politically involved in the current political landscape have the knowledge and the ability to vote? For example, I live in the political system, but because I'm not above 18 years old, I do not have the right to vote. However, they are locked away, as they say, thrown in a box and thrown away the key. Therefore, they surely do not have the knowledge or the privilege to vote in these elections. No, thank you. Furthermore, there seems to be some conflict on the proposition about what the right to vote actually is. They claim it is a basic human right and not a privilege. However, they then claim that people don't think about it on a daily basis. Therefore, the right to vote cannot be treated, no thank you both of you, the right to vote cannot be treated as the right to eat, the right to shelter, the right to home, the right to freedom of speech. It is not the same as others. It is a privilege, it is a prestige, since it not only affects you, but others in society, and I'll expand on that in a minute. Thank you. Yes, please.
Do you not think that, as you said, that it's the ECHR considers it a human right, and then do you not think that since it means that allowing them to vote will not be a great punishment in general?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Do you not see the fact that allowing them to vote will not decrease deterrence? It's like that will not make it more appealing to go to prison?
Well, when I was actually doing my English coursework about prisoners, I found out that a homeless charity actually found that prisoners recommitted crimes to go back to prison to, as you say, get shelter, get food. Therefore, the right to vote, adding the right to vote to these rights will completely contradict your idea of deterrence. It will make prison more appealing, therefore increasing reoffending rates, and thus having a harmful impact on society. No, thank you. There are many philosophers such as Hobbes that believe people are animalistic, brutish and selfish people, and the only reason we are kept intact is because we have a strong institution. Prisoners are going against this, going with their animalistic instincts, believing only for themselves. The aim of voting is to help society as a whole, not only you. Therefore, prisoners who believe and they claim that they will vote for their own means. Therefore, why should we allow, no thank you, these selfish people to impact society when they only think for themselves and not others around them? No thank you. Furthermore, they say that they should allow human rights. I'd like to quote a play by Arthur Miller called All My Sons. It is about a man who convicted a crime, and thus his son actually says to him, "You are not even a human anymore." Therefore, why should we allow these humans to have human rights when they have harmed and infringed those of others? No thank you. Furthermore, I'd like to now move on to my own points. Actually, sorry, I'd like to rebut one final point. They claim there are no examples of people who have extremist parties who have inflicted laws that are harmful to society. However, my first speaker implied in 2 points of information an example: the rise of a terrorist group called ETA in Spain, and especially in the era of Catalonia. Therefore, they claim this is only one example, but surely one is enough to prove that these radical extremist parties are allowed and have an impact, a direct impact in society. One is enough, ladies and gentlemen. We do not need several to prove this very simple point. No, thank you. Many prisoners have many psychological issues to commit these horrific crimes in the first place. Surely the proposition cannot argue the fact that in order to murder someone, to sexually assault someone, to infringe upon someone else's human rights, they have not got psychological issues. In the UK, the certified insane are not allowed to vote because they do not have the responsibility or the capability to take this out. Therefore, why should we change this for prisoners? Furthermore, if it is not broken, don't fix it. Prisoners in the UK are not allowed to vote, and this has worked for centuries and centuries. Why change it now? Why increase their rights when all they're doing is harming society? Now, they claim that we are on an emotional rant, an emotional plea. However, this is surely more about humanity. This is about how we feel inside. How would you feel if you know that someone who has murdered someone, sexually assaulted a young girl, has now the right to vote, to make an impact on your society, on the future, the success, the prosperity of your country? That makes me feel bad. That makes me feel guilty. That does not make me feel proud of the society in which I live. Therefore, you'll forgive us if we are an emotional plea, but surely this is what it's about. This tells us more about our humanity, about who we are inside, and about society. Therefore, this House believes that why should we change the laws? Why should they change the laws when they are the ones breaking them? Thank you.
Five minutes, 26 seconds. I would now like to invite the reply speaker from the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we on Team Proposition understand the inherent and unequivocal gravity of franchisement in society. We do not further dehumanise prisoners by stripping them of such a fundamental right, and we uphold on our side of the House the 4 pillars of justice. Team Opposition, on the other hand, whose burden was to prove that this motion will cause unique harms, have not fulfilled their side of the House. Their emotional appeal is not grounded in reality, and I will be analysing the flaws in their case and the strengths and ours through 3 main points of clash. First of all, the principle side about the universality of enfranchisement. The second, the practical side about harms that prisoners voting will give. And finally, the principle of deterrence. Now, the first point of clash about prisoners not fundamentally deserving the right to vote. They on Team Opposition have said that we cannot elevate a prisoner's social status through franchisement. They deserve to be ostracised. They are not on the same level as the rest of us. Now, what we have said throughout this entire debate and what Team Opposition have failed to engage with is the fact that voting is an unalienable right. It is fundamental to the very fabric of society and democracy, and because in democracy power lies at the people's voice, as my team have said fundamentally throughout this debate, this is what defines democracy. As a citizen in a democratic state, your right to food and your right to shelter and your right to drink is the same as your right to vote, because, ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy, your power lies in your vote, and this is something that Team Opposition has completely ignored. Even if we take you at your best, and we assume that people don't necessarily deserve the right to vote, which we've proven throughout this debate that they do, what we say is the majority of prisoners are not heinous people who have committed first-degree murder. And I think that this is something that you've completely ignored and mischaracterised on your side of the House. What we say is that, for example, in Dubai, you can go to prison for a check bouncing. Corporate crimes exist, ladies and gentlemen. Not everyone who goes to prison commits first-degree murder. And this is something that my team have explained consistently and something that you've consistently failed to engage. What we say is that prison is a spectrum. That is what my first speaker said, and that is what you have ignored. And ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, Team Opposition have debated in a world that simply does not reflect reality, and we are not okay with this. You said that prisoners don't pay tax, and you've defined the value of the vote in economic terms, but what we say on Team Proposition is that you've employed a reductive and economic approach that strips prisoners of their very humanity, and we are not okay with this. The second point of clash, the practicality of this debate, the idea that prisoners being able to vote will result in harmful policies being engendered. You said that people who do not agree with the law should not have the right to change it. Now, what we see on their side of the House is that there has been no analysis. They've used 2 cherry-picked examples to counter our full analysis, and we are not okay with this. So, first of all, you've completely ignored our point about how governments have a fundamental duty of care to their citizens. Your example of the Catalonian election, that was a reflection of what society wanted. That may be, in your opinion, a radical belief, but what we see on our side, on Team Proposition, is that that is a reflection of what society wanted. That is not a radical belief. We say that governments have an inherent duty of care towards their citizens. We say that the nature of governments in a democracy is that they are vessels for social cohesion, for commitment, and they are fundamentally for society, not against society. So what we say is that on your side of the House, the idea that prisoners are going to be able to vote and suddenly have open to them this plethora of policies that are inherently endemic and harmful to society is completely a mischaracterisation of the way democracy works. Because, ladies and gentlemen, can you please give me an example of where a government has actively acted
active against the views of that population. No, you cannot. Your cherry-picked example is irrelevant to this debate, quite frankly, and we do not see how your analysis engages with our side of the House. You've completely ignored that point. And finally, this idea of deterrence. You said that voting will completely reduce deterrence because if you know that you can vote once you're in prison, then you're going to keep on committing crimes. You said that it treats them as equals and that we cannot do this to prisoners. So what we're saying is that you fundamentally misunderstood the impact of voting on deterrence. We say that when you commit a crime, you don't think to yourself, oh no, when I steal from this shop and I go to prison, I'm not going to be able to vote. You think, no, I'm going to prison, I'm going to be ostracised from society, I'm going to be locked up, I'm not going to be able to see my family, I'm not going to be engaged as a normal person in society. Voting is not the preoccupation of criminals when they commit crimes, is not even an element of deterrence. And also, you've completely misunderstood our entire analysis. What we say is that voting is not equatable to letting someone off scot-free. It just simply further stabilises, humanises and attaches people to society and increases their sense of civic awareness and responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. And this is essentially what we want to do because we want to rehabilitate these people. We want to prove to them that they can become normal citizens, they can be integrated into society, and this is not something that Team Opposition have upheld on their side of the House. So in conclusion, we have proven that voting is a fundamental right. Our motion not only upholds but strengthens the four key pillars of justice, and for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, we beg you to propose. Thank you.
Finally, I would like to invite the reply speaker from the opposition.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the opposition, judges and chair. Today we have witnessed 4 great speeches with great passion. They all felt what they were talking about. I mean, I felt like I was in a theatre. With Lady Macbeth talking to the possessed demons. But I urge you to please look past this. Please look past the passion. Let's look straight into the arguments, straight into what they're trying to say, because I know we are able to do this. To begin with, their first speaker mentioned we can't simply put prisoners aside, lock them into a box, throw the key into a river, and forget about them. Yet, we never said this. We do not believe this in any way, shape, or form. We believe prison is a medium of rehabilitation. But if we do that, the first speaker proposed, and treat them as innocent, how will they ever realize that what they have done is wrong? How will they ever realize what they have done is awful and they have to rehabilitate? Meaning that what they propose actually acts against one of the 4 main points upon the argument is made, that being rehabilitation. To continue, the second speaker went on and on to say that if we proved how prisoners voting will harm society, we would be right. If we prove how a prisoner voting, our side of the argument is right and prisoners should not vote. This is his words. Well, I will happily do that. Prisoners have proven to be selfish and not care about society at all, and therefore won't take the nation's interest into account and vote for policies which do not favour us. There you go, I proved it. Prisoners should not vote. They responded to this saying politicians will not put forward harmful policies. Yet my first speaker, P.O. Ireland, provided various examples of when this has occurred, to what they answered, and I quote, "That is one example." True, that is one example which proves your argument wrong. And I'm not cherry picking anything. It's an example of politicians who have put up policies who have harmed our nation, and that is Spain. To conclude my rebuttal, I would like to address the argument provided so rigorously by the third and fourth speaker. They said how not voting will not be a deterrent for criminals. Criminals won't really care if they vote or not. That will not make them go to prison or not. Well, if they don't really care, why should they vote in the first place? If you don't care about voting, you shouldn't vote. You should care about your nation, actually care about the future of our children and people. Ladies and gentlemen, what is voting? What does voting actually entail? Voting comes from the Latin word votum, which means a vow. By voting, you should vow to look for the interests of your country, the society, and your people. Voting is the way you have to directly influence the future and well-being of the people you care about, and therefore should always take the greater good as a priority. Prisoners have clearly proven they do not care about anyone except themselves. Not only do they only care about themselves, but they're also willing to end with other people's freedom, to harm, to murder, to rape other people for their own interests. They have proven they will not care about the nation's interests, therefore should never be allowed to vote. Furthermore, a major duty of politicians is to decide how the nation's money is spent. This money is the one provided by our hard-working families in the form of taxes. Prisoners do not pay taxes. Why should people who have committed terrible crimes, who have destroyed people's lives, be allowed to decide how other people's money should be spent? Why should they have a say on how the money other people produce should be used? It will be completely unfair. Not only this, but also it will have the detrimental effects on society. How would you feel if a man who's murdered your wife, or raped your daughter, or who has stolen one of your most greatest possessions, was given the right to decide the future of your whole nation? I personally would feel terribly, and I'm sure you too. Not only this, but prisoners are prone to make the wrong choice, as clearly with the lack of information, they will be unable to have a proper judgment. Apart from not being able to make the right decision due to the lack of information, many have psychological problems, and innocent, certified insane people are not allowed to vote in the first place, so why should prisoners be able to do so? Ladies and gentlemen, we are all together working to build a better society. You yourselves work countless hours providing food for your family and taxes to build hospitals, schools and roads. We are working every single day as students, learning and studying as much as we can to do this in the future. The amount of effort we're putting into building a more prosperous society is immeasurable. And criminals are doing the exact opposite, harming our society for their own personal benefit. How can we allow them to have a say on our future? Ladies and gentlemen, why should they change the law when all they do is break it? Thank you.
Minutes, 48 seconds. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If the judges can please hand me their scorecards and we can find out what we're doing. Thank you.